Yo, Joe!
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe is there. It's G.I. Joe against Cobra and Destro, fighting to
Originally
save
conceived in
the
the
day.
1960s, G.I. Joe was first an action figure, with Kung Fu grip, of course. G.I. Joe also experienced a boon in popularity thanks to his 3 3/4-inch figures, and of course, the massively popular cartoon show. If you were a kid in the 80s, you know that G.I. Joe was the sauce. But I will admit, G.I. Joe wasn't my favorite. There were a few other cartoons that I were more into. I was more into Thundercats, He-Man, Voltron, and Robotech during my childhood, but I digress. Another medium was getting popular during that time, and that, of course, was video games. One of the very first G.I. Joe games I had the pleasure to play was on my old Commodore 64 system. Now, the Commodore 64 was one of the first gaming systems I ever owned, along with the ColecoVision and, of course, the original Nintendo. Now, you thought you kids had long loading times? Look at what we had to deal with. Yeah. What was cool about Commodore 64 games back in the day, though, is nobody ever bought games, really. We all shared in between each other, just sharing floppy disks. That was cool. Does this game ever load? Whew, boy, that's a long time, huh? Well, I'm not doctoring this at all. This is actually how long it takes. Hey, there we go, finally. When this thing finally booted up when we were kids, damn, we had an insta-boner. We had a G.I. Joe video game, man. The G.I. Joe theme is pumping, and you're just ready to blast some Cobra heads. Naturally, as far as today's standards go, the graphics and sound don't really hold up, but, you know, for me, back in the day, it was pretty freaking sweet. You get this little map screen you get to choose your mission from, and from there you go to choose your enemy. Well, you don't really choose it, the computer chooses it for you, but you have to choose a button to make it go. The only problem with these Commodore 64 games is the waiting. Now here you can see all the classic villains available for you to defeat. Destro, Baroness, Zartan, Firefly, Cobra Commander, Storm Shadow, Major Blood, and Scrap Iron. I don't remember that guy, but look at your selection of Joes. I mean, you got a bunch of them for such a little game on the C64. That's pretty cool. Once you've chosen your Joe and your enemy, Duke reminds you to flip the disc over, because you had to do that back in the day with floppy disks. Sometimes half the game was on the other side. But once you complete that, hey, you're off in your little APC there, and you're off to have your fight with the Cobra enemy of your choice. Well, I forgot, it's actually the computer's choice. It's just misleading the way the game is set up. You have to actually push left or right or a button, and then your enemy will actually choose himself for you. And again, you have to wait. This is another loading screen. How about that? Ugh, what a pain in the ass this is. Finally, once the loading screen passes, you're taken to the locale of your choice, and you get a little one-on-one fight. Over here up in the left corner, you see the life bars, and a little indicator on the bottom indicating when you can fire and when you can't. Gameplay is kind of simple and standard, but hey, this is what we wanted back in the day. Simple. The best 2 out of 3 rounds, whoever gets killed first. And once one person is offed, he's blacked out in the select screen and you can't choose him again, either for the computer or yourself. So you better watch out, otherwise you might lose some of your favorite Joes. As far as the different Joes are concerned, they all have different attacks. For example, Scarlet shoots her crossbow and Zap will fire his bazooka at people. And they all have different strengths and weaknesses. Some guys that can move faster, some guys that can reload and shoot more often, and of course there's guys that can just do a crap ton of damage. There's a couple different battlefields to fight on in this 1v1 style. Not sure exactly how many there are, but there's quite a few. Each stage has its own obstacles for you to move around, both moving and non-moving, threatening and non-threatening. Kinda like this little Cobra robot here. He'll do damage to you, but if you can knock your enemy into him, he'll do damage to him too. He doesn't care. Now there is actually another game type to be had in this game. If you find one of these little circular areas instead of one of the diamond-shaped ones, it'll take you to a more vehicular type of combat instead of the one-on-one on-foot fighting. Over here, your choice of Joes is kinda limited. You only get 4 to choose from as opposed to the normal 12. And you get 2 types of flying guys, Ace in the jet, Wild Bill in the helicopter. And then you have Stealer in the tank and Clutch in the jeep. The air ones are kinda harder, I find. You're always moving, which is kind of annoying. But if you're in the tank or the jeep, you can control where you're going a little bit more. So, here you are, basically just wandering around, looking for these turrets and these radar dishes to shoot up and blow into oblivion. Now, you gotta be really careful in these stages, because you take one hit and you're done. You're dead. You only get 3 lives, and you gotta look out for everything. Especially when you're on the ground in the jeep and the tanks. If you even touch one of these little rocks, you're dead. That's kinda cheap to me. But I guess that is one of the natural advantages to being in the air. Ace here is probably the hardest person to use in these missions just because he goes so fast and he's hard to control. And you get these missiles that chase you all the time. That's a pain in the ass. The game goes on and on like this for, well, ever. It doesn't really have an end. This was back before the games had endings. So once you beat a Cobra, he becomes locked until a few turns later, he becomes unlocked again. Same thing with your Joes if they ever get locked. So you pretty much just do this until you get tired of it. Fast forward to 1991 and bring in the NES. Here comes G.I. Joe once again. I guess they couldn't use the trademarked theme for this one, so they kind of used some generic kind of thing. Here you get to see all the Joes you get to choose during the game. You got Duke, Blizzard, Snake Eyes, some guy called, what's his freaking name? The thing will show up and tell me. There he is, Captain Gridiron. I don't even remember this guy. But there's also Rock and Roll too. And at the end of the game, you actually get to control General Hawk, which is pretty cool too. At the beginning of each stage, each Joe is appointed the leader for his squadron for the time. And you get to choose 2 of the remaining Joes you get to take with you. My main problem here is, what's up with Duke? He's got the peach face with pink arms. That just makes no sense whatsoever. Now this game is a side-scrolling run-and-gun type game. This is pretty much the only way to play. Every Joe has its own attributes. Like Snake Eyes can jump a lot higher than the others. Rock and Roll has a lot greater firing power than the other Joes. And Captain Gridiron punches a lot harder than the other Joes too as well. You can switch other Joes on the fly, like in the past Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game, the original one for the Nintendo. So if one Joe's running low on health, you just switch to the next one. Now, speaking of things that don't make sense, take a close look at Dick. Why does he look like a soldier from Team Fortress 2? His helmet's over his eyes, and he's wearing a helmet. Duke never wears a helmet. That's General Hawk. I don't know if they intended for General Hawk to be the first player in this game, but it just doesn't look anything like Duke. It makes no sense to me. As you go through the game, each Joe can pick up power-ups that will increase the spread pattern of his gun. doesn't increase the firepower as far as I know of, just the spread pattern. And if you're thinking about going through this game just blasting everything in sight, you better think again. There's limited ammo. So there's going to be some situations where you're just going to have to punch your way through. Ammo is usually best wasted on the bosses of the game, of which there are many. There's about 6 missions with about 3 submissions each, so there's going to be quite a few bosses for you to shoot bullets at. Better off saving them up for these guys. Every once in a while, you're going to come across a level like this one. These deviate from the typical gel level by putting in bombs or some other things that you have to find. So it makes the path fairly non-linear. You can also aim your shots up and down, as opposed to always firing from the hip sideways. During the last mission, you get to control General Hawk, who's broken in a lot of ways. He has some of the highest damage potential, including his fists and his gun. Plus he has a jetpack, he can just go wherever he wants. This makes finding all those pesky bombs a hell of a lot easier. The game was pretty popular and a sequel was pretty much guaranteed. Well, a couple years later, Capcom USA snagged up the rights to G.I. Joe and produced G.I. Joe: The Atlantis Factor. The familiar G.I. Joe theme is still nowhere in sight. Oh, where could it be? This game differs a bit from the original, as it puts General Hawk in the leading role this time. Also, as opposed to having all your Joes available to you during the outset, you have to go forth and recruit all your guys to you. Some guys make a return, some don't, like Snake Eyes comes back, but also Storm Shadow joins the Joe team, as well as playing as Wetsuit, Roadblock, and everybody's favorite, Team Fortress 2, Duke. How come they can't ever get Duke right? I have no idea. Everybody looks like their cartoon counterparts except Duke. Whatever. In this one, you got a map screen that looks kind of like the one in Bygone Commando. And of course, you can choose your own route in which you go on. You can also power up your gun and your fists in this game, which is kind of cool. The only thing bad about this game is you can't aim up or down anymore. You can only shoot straight forward. That kind of sucks. The other gripe I have about this game is they all share the same guns. Storm Shadow, Snake Eyes, they both fire the same assault rifle. They have different moves when they melee, especially when they level up, but it's kind of disappointing to see the same bullet pattern over and over and over again. There are, however, different weapons that you can pick up that every Joe can use. You get these after certain stages. Like this laser cannon. It really rips through the bosses. Every Joe also has their own unique thing they can do. Wetsuit, for example, can go underwater. Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes have their ninja abilities. Roadblock can crouch and crawl through some tight spaces. And Duke gets to do what everybody could do in the first game, shoot in 4 directions. There's some debate as to whether Capcom or Taxan did a better job with their game, but they're both pretty good in their own respects. But there's one game we've yet to cover that you've all been waiting to see, and that I've been waiting to play. Yes, G.I. Joe, the arcade game. Oh yes, this is the one we wanted. This one only made its way out to a handful of arcades, but the ones that did get it, oh boy, I loved being there, let me tell you.
Yo, Joe!
I mean, just look at it. You're bombarded with action the minute the game starts. This is the one. This is the one we were waiting for. Just take your favorite Joe, no ammo to worry about, just go and blast millions of Cobra soldiers. That's all we wanted to do. You got 4 different Joes to choose from in this title. Of course you got Duke, Snake Eyes, my personal favorite, Scarlet, and Roadblock. They all have the same abilities, same firing rate, same missiles they can shoot, so choosing your Joe is purely an aesthetic value. As I said before, there's missiles you can pick up, and a rapid fire option that allows you to hold the button down instead of pressing it like a madman. The gameplay actually reminds me of a game I played earlier in the arcade called Cabal. It's got the same kind of camera style, the same overall gameplay, sort of. What I love is how faithful they were to the cartoon series. You get to fight familiar foes like Tomax and Zaymot, Metalhead, the Baroness.
I can't wait to see you. It's showtime.
Major Blood, Tinhead Destro,
You won't get up after this one.
and of course, Cobra Commander.
Long live Cobra, the greatest!
I do wish they could have kept some of the original voice actors for their roles, but I guess you can't have everything. The game is pretty short, but it's still a hell of a lot of fun. Especially if you got a couple friends hanging around. Well, that reminds me. Wonder what Rambo and DSP are up to. This has been another peek into the games of the past with Bygone Arcade. I've been your host, JoeyFox, and I thank you for coming along for another ride. I'll see you guys next time on that next level.